Laracon, then ping me. Yes, that's it. That's all I've known for the last. Well, I did Laracon. You did then ping me. That's been the last
Mm-hmm.
week, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I did some other crap, but nothing fun. Alrighty, yes.
You are now live on YouTube. Live on
Mm.
YouTube.
What was the other thing I did? Oh, SAML. Oh my gosh. Reverse proxy. Garbage.
All these things sound
A whole
nasty.
bunch of crap I should not even have to think about. But I do have to think about them. Okay, should we start recording?
Yes.
Should I try talking like this so it's not like just the side of my face the entire time, or the front of my face with no, like with the mic right in my face? I don't know if this will pick it up as well, is the only problem. Whenever you're ready.
Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda.
And I'm Jake Bennett.
And welcome to episode 65 of the North Meet South Web Podcast.
All right. Well, it has been quite the week for you. And I'm just going to go ahead and apologize in advance here, because you may hear a little 2.5-year-old in the background saying, Mommy, Mommy. It's 11 o'clock right now. and my
Loud.
2.5-year-old is still awake somehow.
Loud. That's far too
Somehow.
loud. Far too late. I thought we were keeping Eli up late when he was up till like 7 and 8 o'clock this week.
This never happens. By the way, I might have to get up in the middle of this broadcast and go.
Hopefully he sleeps through once he does eventually get to sleep, though.
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers here. We'll see. We will see. So, yeah. So it's been quite the week for you. So Laracon AU this week. How were all the things? It looked like it went really well. I saw lots of positive feedback from people on Twitter. It seemed like it went awesome. Yeah,
it went really, really well. You don't know. There are very few people that do know. There's a lot of work that goes into throwing one of these conferences. And I think the hardest part for me is getting good speakers. And obviously because we're all the way down here, we don't have the luxury, but both because of distance, because of money, and because of financing and distance are the two main things that, we don't have the luxury of just plucking Taylor and Adam and Matt and Jeffrey and that, and, the big name speakers every year. So we have to form a really nice balancing act between those big name speakers and not going bankrupt. So
exactly right.
I think this year, just based on the feedback that I've seen on Twitter and the feedback that I saw and heard firsthand at the conference, that we picked some great speakers. I think we had 17 speaker slots. Of the 17, we had 8 first-time speakers, which I didn't really
seriously,
count
that's
on.
crazy.
Yeah, I didn't really count it until the afternoon of the last day. I went back and looked at, because I knew that we had a few of them, but I thought it was 4 or 5. Ended up being 8 of our 17 speakers were first timers, and let me tell you, they were all terrific. That's
amazing.
They were confident. Their ideas were brilliant. Their presentation was flawless, give or take a couple of technical issues which we had, right at the beginning of talks where slides didn't play and things like that. But even the most experienced
nothing you can do about that. That happens to everybody, right?
Happens to everyone. So all of the feedback that I heard from all of these speakers was terrific. And not only the 8 first-time speakers, but we also had 5 speakers that weren't until now part of the Laravel community. So it was really nice to be able to bring them in and give them a place and to share their ideas. So everything went really well. As I said, all of the speakers were great.
That's awesome. I know that one of the things that I always say, like with teachers, because I'm a formally trained teacher, but like new teachers, like what they lack in experience, they make up for in excitement, right? It's like their first year, they're so excited, they've got so much energy, and they're so positive about their outlook on how teaching is going to go. They've got all these ideas, whatever, as opposed to like teachers who have been in there for like 30 years and they're just like, it's another year. They're just trying to get a paycheck. Like it's just, whatever. So with new speakers, I'm sure that's some of it, right? So they have a little bit of less experience. Maybe they haven't really learned what works and what doesn't, but man, they're so excited and like, they're so, pumped to be up there, and they've put a ton of work into these slides and whatever. So that's pretty cool. I'm sure that actually probably, really helped with like the energy level too. You know what I mean? People really excited to get up there and give their first talk. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And the nerves for most people go away after the first couple of minutes. And once you hit your groove and you remember, you've practiced, you've put these slides together months in advance and you've been practicing them over and over and over again. And I know that several of the speakers caught up with each other once they were all in Sydney and gave each other their talks, and they got that feedback beforehand.
Oh, that's cool.
So
good idea. Yeah,
it was really good. I think some of them stressed a little bit about their slides and things like that, but they were all really good. And I can't wait to see where they go. In the future. There's a couple that I've already said, definitely submit to other conferences. I've had a couple of people reach out to me and say, who are the people that spoke at AU that we should try and get elsewhere. So I'm looking forward to see how things pan out for them in the future. And I think I feel, and from the feedback that we got, we had a really supportive environment for those first time speakers, and I would love to be able to do it in the future. over and over again to give people a platform to launch their speaking careers. Because some people, you speak at a meetup, but it's a little bit different to speaking to a room, 200 people full of developers.
Sure. Yeah,
So
totally. Yeah, giving a room
that's
to
great.
giving a talk to a room full of developers is definitely a little bit more
Yeah.
nerve wracking, right? I'm sure the imposter syndrome is just through the roof, right? When
Yeah.
you're having to talk to a group of developers.
Yeah.
But man, you said like you're not able to get Taylor or whatever, but man, you still had some really solid. I mean, experienced speakers, I guess is
Yeah.
what I'd say, like people who are pretty well known in the community. So you did have a really, really solid lineup. So that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, and we will always aim to have 4 international, keynote-ish speakers, and we bookend each of the 2 days with those speakers. So we start the conference strong, we finish the conference strong on each day. So, and then, I want to keep it local. I know that, the US speakers can speak in the US any year, and the EU speakers can speak in the EU any year. And as we go over time and we start to, build positive experiences for the speakers and welcome new speakers in, and word gets around that hopefully, we're putting on a good conference year on year, that, speakers talk to each other, I'm sure, and they say which conferences that they enjoyed being at and which conferences they wouldn't speak at. So, in time, I hope to be able to have more and more of those positive experiences for our speakers, and we look after them, I think. And I'm sure over time the word will get around.
You're just gonna have to figure out how to get free refills for your speakers, and then you should be all set.
Yeah.
I think that's the only complaint Adam has. So yeah, outside of that, you should be okay.
He's Canadian, but he's a closet American.
Yes. Oh yeah, he loves America. Like he would be an American if he could be, I think.
Yeah.
Which is so funny.
Yep.
In Rocket League, we play Rocket League every once in a while, and for a while he had like a car that had like, it was just decked out in American flag stuff. Like it had a big Uncle Sam top hat and red, white, and blue, and it was hilarious. It was good times.
Overboard.
I know. He's so funny.
Yeah, so it all went well. All of the talks were recorded. The production crew will hopefully manage to edit most of them this week, and then we'll get them into the hands of the speakers so the speakers can have a look at what they look like if they dare review there, especially some of the first timers. They might be a bit scared to. I know that when we started doing this podcast, I really hated listening to it, but
oh, it's the worst.
You come back to it.
It's the worst.
And I mean,
I hate listening to them. Not as much, but
now it's a lot better. We sound a lot more experienced and a lot more like what we know we're talking about.
I think the difference is that when you first start, and this is probably the same with speaking too, is that you feel like every pause needs to be filled with an or something like that.
Hang on a minute. Your side of this conversation is still like that 3 years later.
Well, it's close. I will say it's definitely gotten a lot better. It used to be more like used to be way more like that.
Yeah.
And I think we've both, and anybody who's been doing it for a while, I think you just learn to talk slower, so your brain has a little bit more time to process instead of trying to talk at like a regular, I don't know.
I try and be conscious of the and when the is coming, I consciously try and leave it out, because it's much easier to see an empty spot in the waveform and cut the empty out than it is to cut around an Now, you don't get the luxury of that when you're speaking, obviously, but for podcasting, then that's the next thing. And then because you become conscious of one filler, you start throwing in other fillers. I know that my new one that pains me every time I hear it is
I know what you mean,
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun.
It happens.
I think everyone had a ton of fun. I think the 30-minute time slots were perfect.
Yeah.
So we had, on the first day, we had 2 talks. Then we had a 15-minute break. We had another 2 leading into lunch, or 3 leading into lunch. Then we had like an hour and 45 minutes for lunch, and then 2, and then 2. And then on the second day, it was 2, 2, 2, and 2 with breaks in between. So I think that was perfect. You get one presentation, you get straight into the next presentation. We did no Q&A. the feedback that I saw again around that, and it was Frake's idea for Full Stack EU, and then Taylor adopted it for Laracon US. I think 30 minutes is the perfect time slot.
Yeah, I do agree.
Get on, say who you are, get straight into the meat and potatoes of your talk, and then just off the stage and bring on the next speaker. And it keeps you engaged, because around 30-minute mark is when you start sort of trailing off.
Yeah, change topics. Get on with it. Yeah, exactly. I do agree. I agree.
Keeps everyone engaged, keeps the ideas fresh. For me personally, it's really hard. I loved it. I loved emceeing last year, and I loved it just as much this year in getting involved with the crowd and getting involved with the speakers, but it's really mentally taxing, because I don't take any notes. I've got like one line saying who the speaker is, and I've got one line to introduce the topic itself, and then everything else while the speaker's coming on stage and plugging in and getting set up is working in the previous talk and things that they had. So it's because I'm running around like a blue ass fly, organizing and getting people ready and chasing up other organizery type things. And in future, as the volunteer base grows, which it did this year, we had 6 or 7, I think, different volunteers helping out. But being able to pick up key things from a presentation and working that into the intros, it just makes everything feel much more organic and keeps people awake, I think.
Keeps them engaged in between. Yeah. Yep. That's
but
cool.
In terms of like everything, it just went smoothly. The venue we're at and the staff that are there are perfect. They keep everything on track. They make sure that people get in and out when they're supposed to.
Now, were you able to use the same venue as last year?
Yeah. Yep.
Keeps it easier. Yeah.
It does. And I was very surprised that we didn't have a huge number of return attendees. I think it would have been about a 70-30 split this year, which was interesting to me. So I wonder what we did wrong last year that made them not want to come back. Or maybe they were just too slow to buy their tickets this year. I think part of it is that we didn't have, Taylor and all that. And that's just something that's going to have to be the way it is, just because of our size. And as I said at the start, our size and finances and things like that, we're nowhere near the scale of what Laracon US is, knowing how much, time and money went into that.
But you're only on year 2. And I remember year 2 for Laracon US, and it was not that big.
Yeah.
It was not that big.
This is where giving, fostering good experiences for attendees and for speakers. And once, as I said at the start, once the word gets around that we do have a good experience, and Rhea and I put a lot of time and effort into making sure that happens for our speakers. Anything we can do to accommodate them in terms of travel or accommodation or whatever, we try and do our best because really, if not for the speakers, there is no conference.
Correct. Yeah.
No, there's no point having 200 people in a room if you're not going to have people to speak to them and put on good quality presentations. And the more you look after your speakers, the better it is for the audiences, and the more likely you are to attract more speakers in future. So it was all a balancing act for us this year, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I said to the Cash Money, I'm just gonna crawl into a bowl for the next week or 2 before I start thinking about next year.
Seriously, yeah, you got to take a little break here. As long as you have the venue like sort of like reserved a little bit, for next year, you've got time. You've got time. Yeah.
I already said to the
that
venue.
Is one thing that does make it easier, is if you have the if you're going to be at that venue next year, that'll be
Yeah,
I know that's a big part of it for Taylor every year, right? Is like figuring out where the venue is going to be. Then it's like budget for that. Then it's new vendors. Then it's all that stuff. That stuff.
I mean, we're fairly limited. When I say limited in terms of cities. I wouldn't go to Melbourne just because it's that little bit further to travel. Brisbane, I don't really know anyone there. I don't have any contacts on the ground that I can, rely on to help me put on a good conference. My hometown is too far away from anything, and Perth would be really good, but I don't have the quality of connections there either. So it's probably going to be Sydney again next year. I spoke to the venue we're at, and I said, look at the dates that you've got free, next October. So
yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's a bad venue, and as you know, it's a 230 seat venue that we can expand up to 380. And I honestly, I don't want the conference to be any bigger than 380 anyway. I think, once you start pushing that size, it's just lots of people moving around. It's too hard to keep everyone on the same page, kind of thing. So, yeah, we'll see
It
how we
can be
go.
done. It's just a ton more work. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
But year
You
on
have to,
year, we
yeah.
improved our speaker lineup in terms of representation, and I hope to improve on that and get closer to a 50-50 split again next year. So that's really important to us as well, to make sure that we're we're not just putting the de facto people on stage every year.
Yeah. Yep. Give a couple other people in the community a chance, and people from the outside too. It's obviously super helpful to have that other perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
What about
Awesome,
you? What
man.
did you
Well,
get up
good
to
job
in
on
the
that.
last? Yeah,
Oh
thanks.
gosh, dude, this was like a week from hell. I'm not kidding. Like um, my wife Laura was even just like, "Oh my word, it's been a day every week for you, or every day this week." I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's been." So we have been messing with SAML authentication. So federated access, as it were. So long story short of that is essentially, if a company who has their own identity management stuff, be it Active Directory, or they use Auth0, or there's a million of them out there, right? But they manage their own user access and privileges and stuff like that internally somehow. They want to use that same identity provider essentially to log into your application. So that's fine. It's very similar to what it would feel like with if you're logging in with GitHub or Facebook or something like that, right? So you basically detect a user from their system, either by like an IP address. So you say, "Oh, it's coming from this IP address. I know that's, Michael's company." What's the name of your company again?
Superloop.
Superloop. We'll use that as an example. Oh, looks like that's an IP of Superloops. I know that's them, so I'm going to go ahead and redirect you with an authentication request over to your portal where you will log in. And so the nice thing about that is that your credentials never leave your network. The user credentials that are put in, your username and password, are always being put in on your network, and so they never get passed over the line anywhere, except for inside your network. And then once you've been authenticated inside your network, then your identity provider will create a response request, sign it with a private key, and then send it back over to an endpoint that I've specified. My side will then check the signature, make sure that it's good, and then we'll say, "Okay, grab me whatever piece of identity I've asked for, probably email or something like that, as well as any other information that you've decided to send over along with it." And then either sign you in or create your user, or however you want to do that. And then you're all set. Sign you in to the application.
Nice.
So works great. Really, really cool. Pretty awesome. It was not that difficult to implement, actually. The process itself is very simple, very, very simple. And there's a library out there, a really good library. I'll have to find the link and we'll post it in the show notes. There was two different SAML libraries we found, but one of them was definitely far easier than the other. It handles creating all the routes that you need. It handles encrypting and decrypting all the XML stuff. Not encrypting, I'm sorry, signing and all of that stuff. Basically creating the payloads that go back and forth. So really simple, super nice to set up. So got that all ready to get deployed that on Monday night. Everything's hunky-dory, no problem. Well, Tuesday morning, it's not. Tuesday morning is a bad day. And the reason why is because we have this reverse proxy that sits in front of this application, and it was just a mess all day Tuesday, all day. So I rolled it back on Tuesday night. I'm like, forget this, not doing this anymore. So gave it to the other guys, the IT guys, and basically was like, "You're gonna have to figure this out because this is not my wheelhouse. This is not what I do. I don't know. I don't know. You'll let me know when it's ready to go."
Yeah.
So handed that off to them because that was just a nightmare. And then on Wednesday, we have an RDS. We're testing, pushing a bunch of stuff to RDS because we had a local database server that was having some issues, and we were having to start doing tuning and stuff on it. We're like, you know what, we don't have a DBA here. Like it would just be cheaper to just pay RDS to handle this for us,
Yeah.
and then we don't have to have like, it has snapshot backups every minute kind of thing. It's just like it'd be really nice. So we're pushing things to RDS. Well, two of them, the two apps that we had on RDS just decided to go down on Wednesday for
Yeah,
some reason.
AWS had a whole bunch of
Yeah,
issues this week with different things.
yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And with that issue, actually, with that, like SQS went down or something,
Mhm.
and Taylor had that whole deal, whatever, and it was weird because I think what he was like, yeah, it's not working, but their dashboard, Amazon's dashboard, was like all green, everything's good. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's not good actually, and so we had some of a similar situation where RDS was just down, just stopped working. Dashboard's all green, everything's working fine. It was down for like an hour, and then all of a sudden it came back up. So we're freaking out the whole time trying to figure out, like, is it us? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? And then all of a sudden it just comes back up. So it's like, well, I guess
Yeah.
I'm glad we didn't move everything over there at once, but I'm hoping this is just one of those, like, okay, once every 3 years you get these weird instances where like AWS just starts to flake out or whatever. But man, hopefully that doesn't happen often, or else obviously that's going to be a big problem. So
That
we'll
is
see.
the downside to relying on Amazon, is that it's no different to Amazon going down or your own tin going down.
Right,
Someone
which it
still
did,
has to
which
fix it.
ours has gone down. It's just that
Mm.
when it goes down internally, you can at least say, "Oh, we're working on it. We know what's going on." With
Yeah.
AWS, you don't really. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like, okay. So you just kind of have to have a fallback plan in place. So, my fallback plan is like, okay, I have local backup, or not local backups, but I have like backups in some location where I can quickly snapshot, restore those to a local database, and change the address or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I really needed to. So yeah, it was a mess, dude. It was it was not a good week. It was a bad week. So that kind of stunk. But
The good thing about weeks is they end, and then you can
yes.
try all again next week.
Yeah. That being said, though, I did get to work on Then Ping Me for a while, which was really fun.
I did see.
Um,
I didn't get a chance to look too much at what you were doing, other than the high level notes that you were sending me on Telegram.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so basically, we have the structure in place that you've been working a lot on the package and getting the project like set up from like step one. So
Mhm.
logging in, and then basically we create a project for you automatically, and then give you the directions to get that project up and running, which is essentially Composer install the package, run this command, and then all of your tasks will just appear in the dashboard there. So that's good. So I kind of took on the next piece, which was, okay, how do we handle when a task pings in? And so we have 3 different types of payloads that will come in. We have a starting, a finished, and a skipped.
Mhm.
So the starting and the finished is just what it sounds like. If the task started, if the task finished, and then skipped is if you have a job that is scheduled, but it has some conditional rules around running or not.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have like a when
A truth
method on there,
constraint, they're called.
a truth. Okay, a truth constraint's a good. Yeah, that's what it would be then. So you can check, right? You can pass in some closure, and if it returns true, then it'll run. If it returns false, it won't. So skipped is just another payload that we might accept. So I created rules for, or not rules really, but how do we handle those things? So there was a couple challenges. Number one is we're using webhooks, like Spasszy's webhooks package, which is good. It's just I've never used it before. So there's a couple pieces to it that were new to me that I haven't done before.
Mhm.
But like you said, like, and you teased me on Twitter, you're like, you really hate signing those payloads, don't you? It's like,
You do. Which was
it's just
surprising
funny.
because you were just talking about doing SAML and all of that signing that you
literally,
were doing.
Yeah, literally, that was like, and I said on Twitter too, like, it's a new experience for me. Like, I've never done signing of payloads or anything like that. Like, I always just protect routes with like an API key or something like that. But a user API key and a token guard with Laravel. But signing the payload is fine too. Here's my question. So like, we signed the payload, fine. If somebody just modified like the vendor package stuff, right? They could send anything they wanted though, right? I mean, we can verify that it's coming from.
You verify the payload, but the signing key has to be the same on both sides. So we, as part of the setup,
We got the UUID, right? Is the signing
for
key,
the
right?
setup, it's the UUID, but we also, as part of that setup, generate the signing key to use for all subsequent requests, and that gets stored with the user. So the user creates the payload, we sign it on the client side with the package, and that gets sent across with the signature in the header. And then on our end, we make sure that the signature matches what we generate for that payload. So basically it happens on both sides. We take the array, we JSON encode it, we do a hash of that to get the signature using the signing key. And when it comes, so that's all in the package on the client side. And when we get the payload, we know what the user is, right? Because it comes to their project.
Sure.
We get the user's signing key, and then we do the same thing on our side. And then we make sure that the signatures match. So that means they can't modify it in flight and all that kind of stuff. So if you change the signing key on your side and it's different to what we have within the SaaS side, within the server side, then we'll be able to say, well, that's not a valid payload. So that's why we give people the option to obviously update that signing key later as well.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is the signing of a payload really only prevents like man-in-the-middle attacks.
And it prevents invalid payloads from being sent as well. So if you hook
does it though? Because all you have to do is just have the correct signing key. You don't like. So what I'm saying is, if they have the correct signing key, but they go into the package and they say, remove this key. Don't send that key along with a starting ping. So I can't say that like 1000% for sure, like just because a payload is valid because they signed it with a key, that I should never have to validate anything on my side of things. No, I actually still do.
And the signing of the payload is not to say that you don't validate what's in the payload. The signing is just to validate that the person that should be sending that payload is sending the payload.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So what?
We still have to make sure that the keys are there, that the right types are there, that they don't send like some arbitrary string that we don't know how to handle. Exactly. That they don't remove the key that we're expecting, because that would still then that would then go to the secondary layer, and that's where we would send back we wouldn't send back a 422 at that point. We could send back a validation error at that point.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is like the signing of it really is. It protects the user from somebody modifying their quest in flight, as you called it, but it doesn't give us any conveniences. It just makes sure that
it means that we
have an authorized user.
Yeah, it means we don't have to worry about API keys and all that kind of stuff. It's
sure,
and it means that you don't have to authenticate with an API. You don't have to cycle the keys, whatever all that other stuff is. It's how it's quote the way to, or probably the most convenient way to do webhooks between applications.
So we do still sort of have to manage a key, right? Because the key that we generate a key when they compose or install the package, or when they run our command once they do that, secret. Right?
But it's all a hands-off thing. They don't have to come to us and do that. They can come to us if they want to change it at any point in the future. It's just a convenience that we pre-generate it and set it up as part of the project setup.
So when they actually go to deploy and they need to know what to put in their ENV, do they have to grab that from their ENV, or how does that, like, what's the story look like for that?
So the way that we do it currently is we set it in the ENV when they install the package. Now, you're probably installing the package locally.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure the best scenario there, whether you change the key, or because then they're going to have that same key for their local environment as their production environment and so on. So,
and we're just checking, but in the package we'll just check to make sure that like they can't do a starting ping or ending ping or anything. I think we talked about that, saying like you can't actually run something from production or from a non-production. We won't listen for those. I think we can.
Tasks. You may have a staging environment that you want to still monitor. I think we still log the pings that they come in and just flag the environment that it's from, and by default only act on things that come from production.
Interesting. Okay, that's
I mean, it's possible. you could just make it a configuration thing that says, log all pings or only log pings for production or only log pings from these environments. I think by default, probably just production only anyway, at least when we ship the initial version.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm interested in figuring out kind of what that looks like, because we'll have to probably talk about that like with the user, right? We'll kind of have to explain to them like, hey, when deploying to production, here's how you deploy to production. Take the key that was generated in your setup in your .env and bring that over to here, or here's your signing secret. Like we'll give that to them and like in the app or something, right?
I mean, there is no reason like they could compose or require the package locally, and then run the setup command in production. That works.
Yeah, sure.
And we detect if you've got cached configuration when we write the variables to the environment. We will also recache the config. So the only thing we won't do is restart npm, fpm rather.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So there's a few approaches to that. I think there's probably a command that we could create that you'd run when you do it on deploy. Like we talked about this at last episode, where we create a command that you run as part of your deploy to update your tasks and whatever else.
The other thing I was thinking about, which is interesting, is you could do that too with like a GitHub action. So if you use GitHub Actions, which is still in beta, it's pretty cool.
All of the then ping me tests failed when I enabled it for some reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but only in GitHub Actions. It was fine in Chipper, and it was fine in local. It's just
Travis.
A bunch of stuff broke in GitHub Actions.
Yeah, so so we don't use GitHub Actions right now for testing. Like we use all our testing stuff in Travis and all that, and it's fine. But you can have so Sentry, for example, you can create releases when you push code. And then you have to, when you deploy the release, you then have to let them know that you're deploying it to an environment, like to production environment. So you can create the release ahead of time. The thing that you have to create the release in Sentry, though, that makes it the most useful is you have to have the SHA of the most recent commit that you're pushing, and then you have to have the SHAs of all the commits in between the last push to production and the push to production that you just have now. So like, for example, if you're merging in 10 new commits, it wants to know about all those commits and who was responsible for each one of them. And then what Sentry can do is it can intelligently say, oh, it looks like you had an error on this line in this file. Who was the last person to push that? Oh, looks like that was Michael Dorinda. Okay. Assign that task to him. He's the one who should be able to figure this out because he changed that line, right? Well, Laravel Envoyer does not know anything about Git history because it just downloads a tarball. It's a zip basically, and then it expands it and installs it, and no big deal. But it doesn't know any of that stuff. Well, GitHub does. So when we push to master, we have a GitHub action that will say, go, do the Sentry CLI, and then use our key, and it has a spot for secrets in GitHub as well. So use our key and go ahead and push up all the commits and tell Sentry that we're creating a release. And then in Envoyer, the only thing you have access to is the most recent SHA. So in Envoyer, then we will say, go ahead and deploy that release in Sentry. So we just tell it, here's the SHA signature, deploy that, we're deploying that release. And then it does that. So that's cool. But in GitHub Actions, we could say, if you have that, we could just say update all our tasks. It would just look through your scheduler and push any new tasks up to then ping me. That would work too. I mean, again, it's like just coming up with all the different tools and ways that you can do that, whatever's going to be most convenient for your users. And that's definitely down the road as we have people who make those requests. But but anyway,
we'll put them into
the web
Clubhouse project.
Yes, there we go. Exactly. So the webhooks thing was interesting for me. So that's Spatie, and they do a good job with that. But then after that, it was, okay, we can create a check-in for the task, no big deal. But it was, how do we want to handle those? So we're creating a ping record for every time we have something that comes in, and once a starting ping comes in, it will also update the next run at on the task. So with that, and we have the same problem with our current dashboard, which is that if you just set the next run at time to be the actual next run at time, if your job has not finished by the time that comes around, and you're checking to see if there's any missed tasks, it will erroneously alert you to say this task is missing. When it's not missing, it's just currently running.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if it runs, yeah.
I think you wouldn't set the next run out until the task finishes. But it depends. I suppose it'll depend on whether or not that task is set to run without overlapping, because the decision is different based on that logic. If you've got it set to not overlap, then the fact that it misses a check-in should raise a warning that's like, hey, your task is running longer than the interval between runs. So I think that's a different kind of alert that, hey, you're running this every 1 minute, but your task is taking 75 seconds to run. If the task is not set to be without overlapping, then that's a more critical thing, right? That it's going to run every minute, but it's taking more than a minute to run. So I think there's different logic there depending on whether or not they have done that, and different notification required depending on whether or not that's being used. Because as I said, if you've got something that runs every minute and it starts running at, say, like 3:08 p.m., right? So it's just started running and we've got the start ping. The next run at is 3:09 p.m. But if we don't get the finish before the next start, then we need to say, hey, this task has taken too long to run. If we get the finish, if we get another start, what did I just say? If we don't get the finish before the next start, well, I think that's it then, isn't it? If we get another start before we have a finish, that's a invalid state, because you shouldn't. And at that point we would say, hey, this
unless
task
without
is running.
overlapping is true.
Yeah. And this task is running.
Unless they're allowing overlapping.
Yeah. If you're saying this doesn't have without overlap, like if the task does actually overlap, then that's one error. If the task doesn't overlap, but we miss a check-in, then we say, hey, there's a problem here. Your 1 minute task is taking 90 seconds to run. Maybe you should increase the time between pings, between runs.
So the logic I have right now essentially is this. Once the task has started, I am now going to say it's not missing.
Mm-hmm.
The task isn't missing. It actually started. So that's not the case anymore. So as soon as I get a starting ping, I say set the next run at. And again, basically the first issue I wanted to deal with was like, okay, the next run at, I can look at the cron expression that comes in and figure out when the next run at is going to be. And the other part with this was time zones, like making sure that the time zone that they are sending it in through, we convert everything to UTC and make sure we store the timestamp of that. We need to store it in UTC. So basically look at the now in their time zone and then generate the cron expression for what it would be in their time and then convert that to UTC. Because that's important so that we can store it on our side and make sure that everything's consistent for us. So doing that, but again, you don't want the way that I want to check to see if something is missing is I want to look through all the tasks and I want to look at the next run at. And if the next run at is in the past, it's in an error state, or it will be fired into an error state, right? We will move it from a passing task to a missing task.
Well, that would depend on the state that it's in at the time that you check, right? If the next run at is in the past and the job is still running, that's a problem. But if the next run at
So this is how I've gotten this. So because there's basically three things. So the way that I'm making this work is if the starting comes in, as soon as starting comes in, I record that ping and I set the next run at on the task. Mm-hmm. So it says As soon as it starts, if it's supposed to run in another 5 minutes, go ahead and set the next run at. Now it's never going to cause an alert to come in because I've already got the start. And so don't worry about it, right? So at that point, it transitions from being a task is missing to okay, now I've got a ping that's out here that's set to starting. And then I set a expires at on that ping. So that starting ping has an expires at timestamp, and we can now check for any starting pings that have expired. So if you have an expired ping, basically, which doesn't have another, if it's just open, it's been running for too long, then we can let them know either you have a long running job, or it never reported back, or this is something you're going to want to check on. And we can alert that way. Of course, at that point, again, you have some of this overlapping versus non-overlapping. You have default grace periods. How long do we allow for a job to run before we tell them it's a long-running job? And some of this is going to be based on the data that we gather once we start getting pings in. So we'll be able to determine here's the average amount of time it takes to run. What we had basically said initially is we said we would take the difference between what time it is right now and what's the next time it's scheduled to run. So if it runs every 5 minutes, we said we'd take 80% of that time, which is 4 minutes, and we said we'd allow it to be open for that long before we alert them to say, hey, you have a job that's taking too long, kind of thing, right? So there's a missing task alert. There is a long-running job alert, and the long-running job alert, again, kind of depends on if you say overlapping or not. But that's how that works. So that's the situation. So what I was saying about the next run at is ideally the easiest way for me to do this is to be able to look at the next run at timestamp on the task and see if it's in the past, then go ahead and alert. The problem that you don't want to do is if the task has not yet started, there could be just slight differences. Like I know for us, it runs at, I was looking at the logs of some of our stuff. If it's supposed to run at 11:05, it'll run at 11:05.04. Right? Yeah. 4 seconds after 11:05. Well, I don't want to say it's in a failed state if it hasn't pinged into me by 11:05, right? That's, you've got, it takes time to.
If you've got a lot of tasks if you've got 5 or 6 tasks that all run at every minute, right?
Exactly.
Then it might take, because the scheduler will loop over the commands that are due to run sequentially.
Yeah.
So it could be a few seconds before it gets to the one that needs to run. So you need to know what the what the lead time is on when it's actually late. And you could say it's late after 15 seconds, after 30 seconds.
Yeah.
If you've got a task that runs every minute that's late after 30 seconds, you could have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now what I have is I have a default grace period of 60 seconds. We can change that because it also accepts an argument to say you can pass in whatever. So if you don't pass in anything, it will go ahead and set it to 60 seconds after the next run at. If you pass in something, it'll set it to however many seconds you set after the next run at. So all of that to say this, when a starting task comes in, we figure out what the next run at time is on a task, and then we add 60 seconds to that. That way, we can just do a very, very simple query, run over any that have the next run at in the past, and those will all have events fired on them to say these are failing or they are missed, however we want to call that. So I think the logic for it is decent, and it'll make the checks quite simple so that it's just a database query. And that was my goal, because as this gets larger, you're going to want to make sure that those queries are really fast to be able to check for missing and not have to say grab all of them and then go each over them and then determine, whatever. You just want to do a query and then you're done. So that's where it's at right now. The other thing that you have is what you mentioned, which is like a state machine, right? So if you have a task that's in a started or a pending or in progress, we're still nailing down sort of the states, I suppose, of a task. So if it's pending and you have another start method or another start ping come in, obviously that's not correct. So that would then throw an invalid state, and then you'd have to figure out how you want to handle that. The good thing is most of these things that I'm talking about right now are sort of edge cases. So we'd certainly want to account for them, but we can we can still ship a useful product without having handled every edge case. So what I'm trying to do is handle the majority of them, and then we'll loop back and kind of pick up the rest of them as we go. But
yeah, definitely.
with that being said, like as far as the logic is concerned, like I feel like I'm getting quite close to actually having something useful. So that's good because my team needs this.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah,
our
we
current
do as well.
dashboard is a freaking hot mess. Our current dashboard is basically like you go in and set up a job and try and mirror what it looks like in the scheduler. So you kind of say like, this runs every 5 minutes, this runs every minute, this runs every 10 minutes, this runs every hour, this runs every whatever. And then it will also have that same problem, which says like, if it hasn't run by 11:05 on the dot, it's failing. So I get an alert, and then 30 seconds later, it's not in an alert status anymore. So by the time I go to look at the dashboard, it's back to green, So it's just annoying. It's really annoying. So
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
Now,
so we got some good stuff.
Can we talk about the fact that we missed October?
Yes, we can.
Should we probably update that page?
We should. We probably should.
I don't think we're far off, but we should probably just push it and say November.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry to anyone that was expecting in October. Jake had his. You were working on a project that meant you couldn't start until the 1st of October, and I was getting into Oracle AU stuff, and so it slipped, but we've been working on it. We've been plodding away as we've discussed in the last few episodes, and hopefully we'll be able to have it in a state where we'll start playing around with it on our own projects and over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll get some people in the early access list to check that out as well. If you're interested in a Laravel specific schedule task monitoring solution, definitely check it out at thenping.me. I think you and I discussed sending out a email to that list.
Email this week, yeah.
Yeah, and just letting people know where we're at. To those of you who aren't listening to the show, or to clarify some of the thoughts. So we'll do that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it is exciting. Like it's like, again, we've both said this, like if at the end of the day this literally means nothing except for we have a better tool for our teams, I'll still be really happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of where it's at right now, and the current state of things. And there's a couple different pieces of tech that I'm kind of like, not even tech, a couple different sort of patterns that I'm thinking through as far as like what would be really helpful with this. So I said today that it was event sourcing seems really interesting for this, because there's a couple things where it's like, okay, if you've only had one, if it's only failed one time, do you need to alert? And then like if you want to have customized, well, if make sure it's failed 3 times in a row before you alert me or something like that, or those kind of things become easier, I feel like, with event sourcing, because you just look at the last, you just have these aggregate routes, which you can say, you can put all your business logic straight in there. So you just record the events, and then in the aggregate route, you have all your rules for how you want to do that. And then in the future as well, you can rebuild stuff. So you can say like, I'm actually interested to know how many times has this failed, or not even that, how many times have I alerted somebody, or how many times have we had a 3 failures in a row, and then blah, 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 whatever. I don't know. It's just the data is all there, so you can rebuild everything at any point in the future. Like if there's something you don't know you need yet and you're not recording it, it's like you can't know that in the future until you start recording it. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. David Hemphill was like, just try it out. Like this is the whole point of some of these side projects. It's just you haven't had a chance to do that before. Just try it and see how it feels. So we'll see. I think I'll probably stay on the MVP path for now, but I may look at it in the future.
Yeah, conscious of the fact that we're already running a little bit late with it. I think changing tack to use events.
Oh, totally.
Is probably not
right now.
the wisest of ideas, but
I agree.
I think, and I mean, realistically, the easiest way forward is if you miss a ping, send an email, done.
Yeah.
And then iterate on that once it's out there.
I'm gonna build in Slack notifications right off the bat because they're so easy, and that's what our team uses. But yeah, Slack notifications literally couldn't be simpler. It's like webhook, done.
Yeah, I mean, Laravel makes all of the notifications easy anyway, and we just have one notification and different channels, and off they go.
Yeah, And you have the ability to do these really cool. I mean, in Slack, you've got the really cool
User
stuff with like
attachments.
those cards. Yeah, you can
Mm.
do attachments and like you can say resolve immediately and whatever. So like somebody could do everything without even leaving their Slack dashboard. So it's like, oh yeah, I know that's happening. Go ahead and resolve or snooze
Hmm.
for 15 minutes or
Yep.
whatever you want to do. So that'd be pretty neat.
Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Anything else? We have anything else for today? I think we're pretty.
Uh,
We do
we
actually.
do.
We have
We've got two
sponsors
things.
and we have.
The logo.
Go ahead. The logo.
The logo. We alluded to this on the previous episode, and we now have from Kaneko the different artwork. We've got logos and alternate logos, and if you were watching the live broadcast, you saw our little wallpaper that we've got there, or our slate screen, or whatever you want to call it. So we'll start rolling those out across social media, and you'll see the new logo or the new cover art when you will have already seen it at this point in the podcast. So yeah, let us know your feedback and give a shout out to Kaneko. He's at Kaneko at Caneco on Twitter. As we said, he's done a bit of stuff, bit of design for different people and different projects out in the community recently as well. So if you're looking for a good looking logo, reach out to him as well.
He did a awesome job, by the way, I will say.
Yeah.
I've not shown it to anybody that wasn't like, wow, that's really good. Like it was very well thought out. Like so people there's so much more to a logo than just like putting text on a screen. And he did a really thorough job. I mean, just little details like he took the colors from our original logo and then combined them into a new color that goes in the between. So you have the north is the blue, south is the red, and then he did like this sort of purplish color for the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Looks super good. He created not only like a text, word mark sort of logo, but he also created a smaller avatar logo that looks really good, as
Yeah.
well as cover art for the podcast, as well as like personality sort of like slides. Like he just really went above and beyond. And so huge shout out to Kaneko. And we'll have to have him on the show sometime soon just as a thank you. Cause seriously, like he didn't have to do that at all. And honestly, it's funny because he did it like pro bono, which I did not expect at all.
Yeah.
I was under the impression the whole time that we were paying him, and so he was like, "What's next steps?" I was like, "Just invoice us and then send over the zip." And he was like, "Invoice?" I was like, "Yeah, like pay you invoice." And he's like, "Oh, you guys aren't paying me for this." I was like, "No, we're paying you for this." He's like, "No. Like I want to do this for you guys. Like you guys have been doing this podcast for 2 years. This is like a thank you." Like I was like, "Oh my word, so generous." Like I really do feel bad. Like you don't want to like I don't know. You want to allow somebody to say thank you if that's what their wish is, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I feel I don't know. It's so I'm still trying to figure. We'll have to send him something. We need to send him like what we probably need to do is like make him a mug, a T-shirt, and like some sticker, and just send him to him, right? Just say thank you because he did such a great job. So thank you very much. Thank you. It looks awesome, and I'm super excited. It's gonna be great. In addition, we have, of course, our wonderful sponsors. So this week, sponsoring the show is CTO Sumo. They are our big sponsor this week. CTO Sumo is, let me pull up the page. There we go. CTO Sumo connects your startup with the right fractional CTO. So what these guys do is they basically allow you to hire out CTO services, which stands for Chief Technical Officer. So these guys provide agile technical project management so they can help align your business strategy, which somebody who can come in and kind of give you the technology stack side of things. They can do mentorship and help with hiring. They can do software architecture and development. They can audit all your current code bases and take a look at seeing if everything's using best practices or catch inefficient code, protect your reputation, make sure that you're not going to have something crash and damage your reputation really. This is a great team, and this website I think has recently been updated as well. Looks really good, and I think this is Joe, right? Is this Joe's?
No, CTO Sumo was not Joe's. Making me
You can cut this out after the fact.
Look bad, yeah. we'll probably fix. I mean, the people listening live will just have to bear with us.
They understand.
They understand how we do this by the seat of our pants. So
We have a couple other people to thank as well, but so we can thank Andreas, Joe from Work Vivo, JP Davey, CTO Sumo, and Rasmus. So those are all of our sponsors. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring the show. Really, really appreciate it. And then we'll wrap this bad boy up. So this is episode 65. Is that right?
mm-hmm.
If you like the show, you can find show notes for it at northmeetssouth.audio/65. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter at Michael Bennett, or at Michael Bennett. Can you believe that? That's amazing. At Michael Dorinda, at Jacob Bennett, or at North South Audio. Any questions or comments? And then, of course, if you like to read us up in your podcatcher of choice or share us with your friends, we always appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. It is midnight. I'm going to bed.
Yeah, good idea. Eli just woke up, so I'm gonna go and deal with him.
I've been watching my little dude on my camera here.
Crashed out.
Finally asleep. He finally passed out.
Sweet.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you. Bye.
Bye.